Joining us on Kapil Sibal's very controversial comment is Mahesh Jethmalani, very senior advocate in the Supreme Court and also member of the Rajya Sabha. Mr. Jethmalani, good evening. Why do you think your colleague in the Supreme Court and in Rajya Sabha, Mr. Kapil Sibal, said what he did, that after 50 years he feels he has no hope left in the institution of the Supreme Court?
Well, I don't know what's the immediate trigger for that statement, Ranjan. I mean, I wish I knew. I mean, I'm a little miffed by why he said it at this particular point of time. It's taken him 50 years to lose hope. He's at the evening of his career. I mean, it's taken him a really long time to say this. But I suppose that this is more inspired by some disappointments in some political cases which he's been handling. So I think it's more out of political frustration than anything else. But I don't want to say anything more about, because it's very difficult to guess intent and motive.
Mr. Jethmalani, just looking at some of the cases where Mr. Kapil Sibal has been very vocal, if I can say that. He's been very active and he's fought some of these cases as well. 2017, the Triple Talaq case, lost that. Ayodhya land dispute case, lost that. Argued for Siddiqui Kappan's bail, was dismissed. Zakir Jafri petition against the SIT findings, lost that. Hijab case got transferred to the Supreme Court, lost that. PMLA case wanted ED's powers restrained, lost that as well. So do you think the comment and the frustration perhaps stems from there?
Well, I'm sure there's personal disappointment. I don't know which, I know he has an impressive list of cases, but, I don't know which particular case of his has irked him so much, or which number of cases have irked him so much. But I'm sure that Kapil's had a lot of successes. It just so happens that, he belongs to that coterie of lawyers that's had their way in the Supreme Court and other courts for a very long time. So, that sense of entitlement at winning has sort of crept in. And he's a little, disappointed at his string of recent losses, I suppose. If you want to criticize the Supreme Court judgment, you must first tell us which one. And secondly, you must tell us why. Because otherwise, you are extremely suspect in your motives. The way to do this is to say that this is the judgment, this is what and why I expected it, and then to leave it open to public debate. You can criticize the judgment. Legitimate reason, balanced criticism is all right. But this kind of running down an entire institution and painting every judge with the same brush. If he has no hope, he should give up practice, frankly. Because what he's really doing is despairing of an institution. Then why do you practice so long?
Yeah. And you made a comment, you said it's a small band of people. Now, this band of people, legal plus political, have very strong opinions on India's judiciary. Perhaps the CJI made several comments talking about these people, saying that they often like to run down the judiciary without knowing the kind of pressure that the Supreme Court of India and judges work under. Now, he may have changed parties, but the criticism is still coming from the same set of people. We recently saw a letter by the Congress party. You saw the letter yourself when Jairam Ramesh got 17 parties on board and openly questioned the Supreme Court. Do you think it's becoming a dangerous pattern now?
Of course it's dangerous. Forget the cases this coterie is involved with. This coterie basically takes up litigations under the garb of public interest litigations, right? For causes which are dear to it's their ideology and their political platform, right? And they've tried to dominate politics for a long, long time by trying to capture the Supreme Court, which they are now being rebuffed, right? The Supreme Court is actually very independent. There was a time when they were. Remember, it's the Congress government that talked about a subservient judiciary as far back as 1973. It's Mrs. Indira Gandhi who did this in 1975 when she superseded judges during the emergency, just before the emergency. But, right now this coterie is out of business. And I think that's what's rankling with them. And Kapil Sibal, unfortunately, seems to be the leader of that coterie. If you look at the entire political attack when the UPA was in government, right, against all institutions in the opposition, all political parties, high-profile individuals, they had a string of successes. They never complained then. They were very happy. They reveled in the successes they were having in the Supreme Court. But now, just because they're on the other side, they can't face the heat.
And you think it's about narrative somewhere, Mr. Jethmalani? A couple of last questions with you. My second last question to you is, you see what happened in the case of Loya, right? In the case of Loya post-mortem, you know exactly what happened. Sibal, as a lawyer, also spoke about the Rafale deal. We know what happened. EVM tampering and hacking. He, in fact, went to London and there was a news conference there. You'll remember that very well. It's somewhere, do you think the question of being setting a narrative has failed for some of these political leaders, also who happen to be advocates?
Yes. I mean, you look at the track record. There has been narrative after narrative. Ever since Prime Minister Modi came into power, there has been narrative after narrative. I mean, there's been Rafale. Then they've taken Pegasus to court. They're now girding their loins about the Agniveer matter, right? So, you know, it's narrative after narrative, and they've been rebuffed repeatedly. I mean, you take the Pegasus case, they made such a hue and cry, they blocked Parliament for almost an entire section of that on that episode. And now they're mealy-mouthed, they're not talking about the result. So many of them who claim that their phones had been hacked refused to give their phones to the expert committee that was formed. This is a narrative. And, you know, they have been now completely exposed. This is an empty narrative. It's an attempt, as I said, to politicize the Supreme Court, to advance political gains through litigation. And when it's failing, they become crybabies.
Yeah. My last question to you, you know, the BJP has been in opposition and was trying to look up but couldn't find too many comments of, you know, senior-most BJP leaders perhaps ever making such comments on the judiciary. Now that we see this increasing pattern of political leaders attacking the Supreme Court, questioning the Supreme Court and judges, do you think the attempt also somewhere is to intimidate the judiciary?
Yes, I mean, certainly this seems to be an attempt to cow down the judiciary, to intimidate it. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, you know, it certainly is. I mean, it certainly is, because I'll tell you, there are a lot of opposition leaders, particularly in the UPA and the Congress, a lot of opposition leaders that are now facing the final stages of criminal prosecutions, or final stages of initiation of criminal prosecutions and seeing them to their end. So, you know, this seems to be a very timely moment to carp about the judiciary, put them on guard, right? But I don't think the judiciary will or ought to be pressurized.
Yeah. Mr. Jethmalani, thank you for speaking to Republic TV this evening. Mahesh Jethmalani, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. I think there's a news conference of the BJP. Let's